What you are about to hear is the story of a forbidden love between a jazz musician and a mysterious woman in 1920s Harlem. Amid smoky clubs and haunting secrets, they risk everything for a love that may just be their downfall. The dimly lit club was alive with music, the sound of brass and saxophone weaving through the thick, smoky air, wrapping around the crowd like a lover's embrace. The jazz club in Harlem was packed, filled with well-dressed men and women in shimmering dresses, all moving to the relentless rhythm of the roaring 20s. But for Eli Turner, the jazz pianist, it was just another night. His fingers danced across the keys, each note an escape from the memories he'd left behind. Eli's music was famous for its soulfulness, the kind of blues that made people stop and listen, that made them feel something deep in their bones. Yet, he remained an enigma, a quiet man with haunted eyes who played as if his life depended on it. For Eli, music was his sanctuary, a place where he could forget the shadows of his past. And then she walked in. Ruby Delacroix moved like she owned the room, her shimmering flapper dress catching the low lights, every step a pulse of confidence and allure. Her dark hair was styled into short waves, her lips painted a deep red that drew glances from every corner. But when her eyes locked onto Eli's, there was a spark, an instant connection that neither could ignore. She didn't break eye contact as she moved closer to the stage, her gaze challenging him, daring him to look away. Eli felt a rush of heat as he continued to play, his fingers moving with renewed energy. Ruby's presence was magnetic, and he found himself unable to resist. As the song ended, she gave him a slow, sultry smile, one that left him breathless. For a moment, it felt like there was no one else in the room, just the two of them, bound together by an unspoken pull. Later, when the band took a break, Ruby approached him, her voice as smooth and rich as the music that filled the room. "You play like a man with secrets," she murmured, leaning close enough for him to catch the faint scent of jasmine. Eli chuckled, though there was a flicker of pain in his eyes. "Don't we all have secrets?" Ruby raised an eyebrow, her gaze searching his. "Maybe. But some secrets run deeper than others." They spoke in low voices, their conversation laced with mystery and intrigue, each trying to uncover the other's past. Ruby hinted at her life in Chicago, of dreams left behind and choices made, while Eli deflected questions about his life before Harlem. But the more they talked, the more they realized that they shared a connection, a shared pain that neither was willing to reveal. By the end of the night, Eli found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. And as the club emptied and the lights dimmed, he offered her a dance right there on the empty floor. They moved slowly, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the lingering notes of jazz be their only witness. In that moment, Eli felt something he hadn't felt in years' hope. But as they parted ways, a sense of unease settled in his chest. Ruby was intoxicating, yes, but she was also dangerous. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of darkness that hinted at secrets she wasn't ready to share. And Eli, haunted by his own past, knew better than to fall for someone who could shatter him all over again. Yet, as he watched her disappear into the night, he knew he was already in too deep. Days turned into nights, and each evening Eli and Ruby found themselves drawn back to the club, back to each other. The smoky atmosphere, the pulsing rhythms of jazz, and the thrill of their connection became their world. Every night, Eli played with more fervor, his fingers flying across the keys as if each note was a confession, a glimpse into the secrets he kept hidden. And every night, Ruby watched him with eyes that seemed to see straight into his soul. As their connection deepened, they spent hours talking in the back corners of the club, where the glow of candlelight softened their edges. Eli shared fragments of his past stories of a life he'd left behind in New Orleans, of a family that had broken apart, and of the pain that had driven him to Harlem. Ruby listened with a tenderness that Eli hadn't experienced in years, her gaze filled with empathy and something deeper, something that made his heart ache. But Ruby, despite her warmth, kept her own past tightly guarded. Eli noticed the way her eyes clouded over whenever he asked about her life before Harlem, the way her smile faded when he pressed her for details. She always deflected, always evaded, turning the conversation back to him or offering a coy smile that hinted at things she wasn't ready to reveal. One night, after a particularly charged performance, Eli couldn't hold back any longer. As they shared a quiet moment on the club's balcony, overlooking the bustling streets below, he turned to her, his voice low and filled with intensity. "Ruby, who are you really?" he asked, his gaze searching hers. "Why do you keep coming here, night after night? Why me?" Ruby's expression softened, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes, a vulnerability she quickly masked. "Eli, there are things I've done, choices I've made. Things I can't change," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You think you want to know, but trust me, some secrets are better left buried." Eli reached out, his hand brushing her cheek, his touch gentle yet firm. "Whatever it is, Ruby, it can't be worse than the things I've seen, the things I've done." For a moment, she looked at him with a mixture of longing and despair, as if she was on the edge of a precipice, about to let herself fall. But then, just as quickly, she pulled away, her expression hardening. "No, Eli. You don't understand. If you knew, if you really knew, you'd walk away." Frustrated and hurt, Eli watched as she disappeared back into the club, leaving him alone on the balcony, the city lights casting long shadows around him. He knew he was falling for her, that he wasn't too deep to walk away, but the weight of her secrets loomed over them like a storm cloud, dark and foreboding. The following night, everything changed. As Eli played his usual set, he noticed a stranger sitting at the bar, his gaze fixed intently on Ruby. The man was tall, with a sharp suit and a cigarette dangling from his lips, his expression hard and unreadable. Eli felt a chill run down his spine, a sense of danger that was impossible to ignore. After the set, Eli confronted Ruby, pulling her aside in the shadows of the club. "Who is that man?" he demanded, his voice laced with worry. "He hasn't taken his eyes off you all night." Ruby's face went pale, her usual confidence slipping as she glanced over her shoulder. "Eli. He's from Chicago." "From my past," she whispered, fear etched into every line of her face. "I thought I'd left it all behind, but it seems like the past has caught up to me." Ellie's heart pounded as he took her hand, his grip tight. "Ruby, tell me what's going on. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." But before she could respond, the man approached, his expression cold and calculating. "Ruby," he said, his voice low and menacing. "It's time to come home." The words hung heavy in the air, and Eli felt his stomach twist. Ruby's face was a mask of fear and resignation, and he realized, with a sickening clarity, that she had been hiding more than just a troubled past. She had been running from something or someone all along. Eli stepped in front of her, his jaw clenched. "She's not going anywhere," he said, his voice filled with a steely determination. He didn't know what he was up against, but he wasn't about to let anyone take her away. The man smirked, sizing Eli up with a look of disdain. "You think you can save her?" he scoffed. "You don't know who you're dealing with." With that, He turned and walked away, leaving Eli and Ruby standing in the shadows, their world suddenly filled with an overwhelming sense of danger. As the night wore on, Ruby confessed everything. She had been involved with a powerful man in Chicago, a man who didn't take kindly to betrayal. She had fled to Harlem to escape him, but she knew that he would never truly let her go. Her connection with Eli had been her escape, her one taste of freedom, but now the past had come to reclaim her. Eli felt his heart shatter as he listened to her story, but his resolve only grew stronger. He wouldn't let her be taken back to a life of misery and fear. Together, they would find a way to escape, to build a life free from the shadows that haunted them both. But even as they planned their escape, Eli knew that the road ahead would be filled with danger. Their love, as powerful and passionate as it was about to face its greatest test. The dim lights of the jazz club seemed dimmer, the music slower, as a heavy tension settled over Eli and Ruby's final night in Harlem. They knew they had to leave. The man from Ruby's past had made it clear that he wouldn't rest until she was back in Chicago, under his control. Eli's mind raced as he planned their escape, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. They would board the midnight train, leaving behind the smoky haze of the club and the memories it held. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, a gnawing sense of dread settled in Eli's gut. He had spent his life running from his own demons, yet here he was, risking everything for a woman he barely knew but loved beyond reason. Just as he was gathering their things backstage, Ruby appeared, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and longing. "Eli, maybe it would be better if you didn't come," she said softly, her voice wavering. "I don't want to drag you down with me. You deserve a life free from all of this." Eli shook his head, stepping closer, his eyes intense. "Don't you see, Ruby? You're my life now. I'm not letting you go. Not to him, not to anyone." She hesitated, a tear slipping down her cheek as she looked into his eyes. "Eli, if we do this, there's no going back. He'll never stop hunting us." Eli took her face in his hands, his gaze fierce. "Then let him come. I'd rather face hell with you than live one day without you." They shared a final searing kiss, a kiss that felt like both a promise and a goodbye. As they made their way out the back door, slipping into the alley under the cover of darkness, the echoes of jazz music followed them, like a haunting melody refusing to let go. But just as they reached the street, they were met with the cold, hard reality of their situation. Standing in their path, blocking their escape, was the man from Chicago Ruby's past come to life. He was flanked by two imposing figures, his gaze sharp and calculating. "Did you really think you could run from me, Ruby?" He sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're mine. You've always been mine." Eli stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of Ruby. "She belongs to no one but herself," he growled, his voice filled with defiance. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The man laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "Oh, I was hoping you'd say that." Without warning, a fist flew, connecting with Eli's jaw. He stumbled back but quickly steadied himself, launching into the fray with the desperation of a man fighting for everything he loved. The alleyway erupted into chaos, fists and shadows blending into one brutal struggle as Eli fought against the odds. Ruby watched in horror, fear and guilt twisting inside her as Eli took blow after blow, refusing to back down. She knew he was fighting for her, sacrificing everything he had left. Desperation surged within her, and she reached for a broken bottle lying on the ground, gripping it tightly. Just as the man from Chicago closed in on Eli, ready to deliver the final blow, Ruby lunged forward, her voice trembling with fury. "You never own me again." The man turned just in time to see Ruby swing the bottle, the jagged glass slicing across his arm. He staggered back, a look of shock and rage contorting his face. In the confusion, Eli managed to break free, grabbing Ruby's hand as they stumbled out of the alley and into the street. They ran, their footsteps echoing in the night, their hearts pounding in unison as they raced toward the train station. As they boarded the midnight train, collapsing into their seats, they clung to each other, their breaths ragged, their bodies bruised but alive. As the train began to move, leaving Harlem behind, they sat in silence, the weight of what they'd just survived settling over them. Eli held Ruby close, his arms wrapped protectively around her as they watched the city lights fade into the distance. Finally, Ruby broke the silence, her voice barely a whisper. "Eli, I'm sorry for all of this. I'm sorry for bringing you into my nightmare." He shook his head, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "You saved me, Ruby. You gave me something worth fighting for." They shared a quiet, bittersweet smile, the scars of their pasts now intertwined. They didn't know where the train would take them or what the future held, but they knew they had each other. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. As the train carried them toward an uncertain future, Eli began to hum a soft tune, a melody that spoke of pain and hope, of love and resilience. Ruby leaned against him, her heart finally at peace, as the rhythm of their love blended with the hum of the train, carrying them into the unknown.